Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Allison Dollar, co-founder and executive producer of the Space Tourism Society's conference, Space Tourism Conference. This is our second in our series of webinar series regarding space tourism, which, as we know, is a burgeoning, wonderful sector. The format for today is a moderated discussion. I will introduce our moderator, but this is a particularly relevant one to our conference series because our tagline for the series is profiting from the space experience economy. And this is regarding the financing of that sector. Some of you may know it's one of the most profitable, if not arguably the most profitable sectors in the space. And we are expecting it to have a $20 to $30 billion market cap at some point very soon, probably in the next 10 years. So that's some serious money. I'd like to introduce our moderator to you. The format for today is we have some wonderful speakers from the funding and finance side, and it's going to be a moderated discussion. We're going to show a little bit of each person's background or whatever they wanted to bring for the company, so you'll see that. But let me introduce your moderator now. It's Robert Jacobson. He is an entrepreneur and investor in his own right. He's an advocate and he's an advisor, and he's also now an author. And he has a wonderful new book out that everybody should pay attention to. It's called Space is Open for Business. And maybe he will mention how we can get that. But at this point, let me turn it over to Robert. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Allison.
Glad to be here. I'm gonna go now. Let's see you guys.
Okay, we'll see you again soon. Thank you, everyone, for being here today for the Space Tourism Society's Space Tourism Follow the Money. So we'll start with maybe a definition real quickly. And I was curious, what was the definition of tourism? I mean, I think we all have an idea in our mind, but what is it from a sort of a dictionary? And it was the commercial organization and operation of vacations and visits to places of interest. Now, I think we all believe that we have our own idea of what space tourism could or could not be. And I'll tell you, after witnessing Spaceship One's first flight to space on June 21st, 2004, one thing of many things that was going through my head was, I want to go, and perhaps suborbital is one of the ways that would be a possibility. Although I realized over time that space tourism could be a lot broader. So we have a really interesting mix of individuals from different stages of the entrepreneurial experience, from the incubation stage, early funding stage, to later private equity stage and acquisition. So a few questions I'll kind of just start first to pepper all of us as we think about this going forward the next hour is, what are our panelists' views on newer business models and the products that don't necessarily fit the reliable, established categories? And maybe some of these models have no history or track record. What are their views around that? And is space tourism one of the beachhead markets for the new space economy? And I know that venture-oriented investors and angels typically invest in solutions. And tourism is maybe not quite like that, but a little different. But what could the range of solutions include that the entrepreneurs and the builders could help solve in this segment that we're calling space tourism? And we're seeing now private infrastructure such as SpaceX's Falcon 9, which is now successfully in operation for the past 10 years. And we just had the first returned human crew from space, and we've got Starship, also by SpaceX, under development, and groups like Axiom are developing commercial habitats. And how is this going to play into this emerging market, orbital and habitats? And do we think that there are mass market opportunities within space tourism, or is it going to remain niche for the foreseeable future? And some of these in-between experiences, the suborbital experiences, which are high-end but still affordable for many but not for all, would be things like Space Perspective's high-altitude balloon approach, or Virgin Galactic Spaceship Two, or Bezos's Blue Origin, his suborbital system. So it's kind of an interesting mix of opportunities that are being developed. So we have a great mix. Again, I'm going to bring the first speaker on. It is going to bring on Bonnie Rosen, who's the program manager to Techstars, the Starburst Space Accelerator. And let's see. So Bonnie, if you want to turn on your video, and I will shut off. You can we can see. Are you there, Bonnie?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, excellent. Great to have you, Bonnie.
Great to be here.
So the floor is yours. I'm gonna step off and allow.
It's actually a video, Robert.
Oh, got it. Okay, excuse me. There we go.
Let me know if you're getting it.
Perfect.
Techstars has made a number of aerospace and specifically space investments that have been really, really promising for us.
Techstars and Starburst have long been trying to find the right opportunity to bring this program together.
So we pulled together our partners to really create a vibrant ecosystem to help entrepreneurs build great businesses in the aerospace and specifically the space industry.
Techstars, Starburst was really going to be a great opportunity for our company. And so I was very excited about Techstars, Starburst, and all of the corporate partners that we would be able to sit down, talk to them, and really explore whether we could provide significant value to them.
Especially Air Force, JPL, Lockheed, Maxar, IAI, North America. Those are very significant partners. And that, in the end, is the main reason that we did this program, was because of those partnerships.
These are the best of the best in the world at what they do. Being able to actually sit down and talk with these world-class experts, get their advice, and to actually start working with them to see what are future NASA missions we can enable.
All these people come together and just brainstorm and figure out what new possibilities our technology could enable.
It's been a big acceleration for us building a relationship with the Air Force and finding out where we fit in.
This has been a transformative experience for our company.
The Techstars program has the right environment to grow this opportunity.
Yeah, this is Robert again. Bonnie, are you going to be sharing any more besides the video, or just waiting till the discussion after this after the video?
Yeah, I think we're all waiting for the discussion.
Okay, great. Okay, I think though we'll have two more people. I think we'll bring on. We're going to have Matthew J. Kuta, our next speaker, who is the president and COO of Virgin Space Holdings and founding executive director of the nonprofit Space for Humanity. And then our final speaker is Meagan Crawford, managing partner of SpaceFund and also the chairperson for the Center for Space Commerce and Finance.
Thank you. If you go to the next slide, I think there may be 2 or 3 slides. Yeah, so nice to meet everyone. My name's Matthew Kuta. As you mentioned, I'm the co-founder and president of Voyager Space Holdings. We're an operating company that is acquisitive and organically acquiring and growing commercial space companies. My co-founder is Dylan Taylor, who's not able to join today. And we are a little bit of a different structure model for this sector. We are not a private equity fund or a venture capital fund. We are technically structured as a holding company, but I'd really just think of us as an operating company. If you go to the next slide. So what is Voyager as essentially as a holding company? You know, one thing that we've observed at Voyager is essentially there's a lack of scale. A lot of companies get a Series A or maybe a Series B, but there's not many follow-on later stage rounds. And by way of background, myself, prior to Voyager, I was on the private equity investment team at Goldman Sachs in New York City and started my career off as an F-15 fighter pilot. And, you know, nearly every time a space company or something related came to our team, we declined all of the investments because we were convinced we were not going to get a 20% net return or IRR, which includes the component of time within call it a 5 to 7 year hold, which, as most people know, most funds have about a 10-year fund life. So how do we bridge the gap between a sector that's about a $420 billion sector overall, with the commercial tourism, you know, being a large chunk of that, to, you know, $1 trillion plus economy in 20 years, lots of national security tailwinds with US and China and Space Force, when it's very difficult with the traditional fundamental financial vehicles of funds with these finite time horizons. So for us, we believe a permanent capital model is really what space and new space particularly need to give them longer runway, more time horizon. And within that, we offer shared services. There's a lot of horizontal integration within subsidiaries, so they can really work together to fly in formation to really bid and win much larger, more profitable contracts and proposals and capture further up the value chain. And then within a vertical integration, which we're able to do because it's a permanent capital structure and a permanent acquisition, we can really help these companies take some of the back office off of their plate. You have a PhD from MIT who has a PhD in astrophysics and spends half of his time doing accounting and payroll and benefits. So we really look to take some of that stuff or most of it off of their plate and really help them focus on what they're really passionate about. If you go to the next slide. So, as we see here, the Space Force, so from a Voyager perspective, we see a lot of national security tailwinds with this, which is a large component of the sector. And, even within the commercial space flight, you think about hypersonics and things of that. And then obviously you see some of these quotes from some recent research reports, kind of think of the private sector things. How does the internet on your Norwegian cruise line work, or in-flight Wi-Fi, or every stock trade on Wall Street has a GPS timestamp. So as we become more globally networked, we think there's a lot of continued tailwinds to this sector that are really acyclical because of US and China really driving this. Because even if it's not directly a national security thing, which Voyager is not a national security company, even if it's purely commercial, the United States, we need to protect those commercial assets that are really driving some of the more pure commercial aspects of the economy. And then I think there's maybe one more slide. And this is a cash flow profile of a geostationary satellite. This is from a Goldman Sachs research report. I think it's really interesting to highlight. What you can see here is, on average, it takes about 6 years for a satellite, a geo satellite, to break even from a cash flow perspective. And you really aren't going to start making profit. You can see the last 5 to 7 years. But if you think of a traditional short-term time horizon, sometimes you may have already had to liquidate your investment. If you're not a personal angel investor or an ultra high net worth individual, for example, Jeff Bezos is selling $1 billion of stock a year. He doesn't necessarily need to make that money back in a 5 to 7 year investment hold. So it becomes an increasingly complex problem from a funding perspective of how to support new space companies that have 5, 10, 15-year time horizons to really monetize. We know it's happening, but how do we bridge that gap? And that's what really Voyager looks to solve. And I think that should be it. And you can skip this slide. I've already touched on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Next, let's bring on Meagan Crawford, a managing partner of SpaceFund and chairperson for Center for Space, Commerce, and Finance. Meagan, are you there with us?
Thank you, Robert. I'm here. So hi, everybody. Ivan, if you could go ahead and advance the slides. I'll be quite quick, just introducing SpaceFund. We are a space-focused venture capital fund, and our goal is to open the space frontier to everyone and enable everyone to help open that frontier and share in the risk and share in the profit. We're starting that process by putting together our venture capital funds, and are hoping to have other initiatives as time goes on to help more and more people get involved and invested in this industry. Next slide, please. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on at SpaceFund is our pipeline. We're currently tracking over 2,100 new space startups companies from around the world. We've published reality ratings. These are databases where we go through our sectors of interest and catalog every company in that sector. We've published reality ratings for over 400 companies now. We've reviewed about 150 active deals in the last few months. And actually, this slide is outdated because I had to send these slides in a couple of days ago. We have now made 6 investments. Next slide, please. Our current portfolio includes these 5 companies. Axiom Space is going to be very, very relevant to the conversation today. Orbit Fab, you just saw in Bonnie's intro video, so that was nice to see our portfolio company featured there. They're great, very proud Techstars graduates. We were also invested in Meagan Space, which recently exited. And we're invested in a company called Eden Grow Systems that is an aquaponics, closed loop aquaponics company trying to solve the problem of how we're going to feed people when they're in space for long periods of time. And then a stealth company we can't talk about quite yet, but the 6th investment that we made, the one logo that's not here yet is SpaceX. We did get in on their recent Series N. And so that's of this current fund, our fund 1, we expect to make 6 to 8 more investments in the coming year. And even as we're standing up our 2nd fund right now. And so that's a quick overview of SpaceFund, and I'll give it back to you, Robert.
Thanks, Meagan. I'd like to give Bonnie Rosen an opportunity, though, to share a little further about Techstars, since there was a little communication gap there. So Bonnie, I want to bring you back on before we get into the discussion. Just share a little more about maybe your role with Techstars, please.
Thanks, Robert. I'm Bonnie Rosen. I am the program manager for the Techstars Starburst Space Accelerator. We are in our 2nd year, and yes, last year Orbit Fab was one of the inaugural 2019 cohort. We are currently in the 2nd round of program. We invest in seed to Series A companies, and our program is focused specifically on space and space adjacent frontier technologies. That includes both hardware and software. And Techstars overall is the global platform for investment and innovation. So we are specifically focused on the space vertical, but there are a number of accelerators, 50 in total, throughout the globe that also focus on investment in different verticals.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I think now we can bring everyone on for a little discussion. Thanks, Bonnie. So I think we can all hopefully use our video here, and I'll kick off with a question of which I referred to in the introduction is, Bonnie, what is your opinion around groups that have essentially they're working on new areas with no track record? It's kind of potentially a new model. You know, they're dealing with maybe market risk and potentially technology risk. And maybe even there's a timing risk, which probably fits in the market. Is that something that Techstars and Starburst that you guys are thinking about when you're working with your cohort? Have you had organizations that apply, you say, gosh, this is just too early?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, everyone starts somewhere, and space as a vertical is nascent in itself commercially. So the most important thing that we do as a program is we make sure that that all of the companies that come through our program are connecting with the most connected, the most able to give support, the most give first. It's something that you hear us say a lot, that are able to dig in with the companies, think through the problems that they're having. And actually Meagan is one of our mentors, and we have a number of people from throughout the industry that dig in with the companies. The program itself is supported by Starburst, but also Lockheed Martin, SAIC, Maxar Technologies, NASA JPL, US Air Force, and a number of others that are just constantly digging in. So the idea is that if that knowledge share is happening all the time, if we're always sharing ideas and thinking through not only how to burst through how things have been done before and think of new ways how to promote those new ideas, but also making sure that wisdom is passed down of mistakes that have been made, things that we can avoid, and we really have seen that gains the most traction, and Orbit Fab is a great example of that. Oh, Robert, we can't hear you.
Excuse me, I was on mute. We'll move over to Matthew. What about the new models? Is Voyager looking at businesses and opportunities where we're dealing with new models?
Yeah, so based off our structure, I would say we look at companies that are a bit more mature. So you really won't see Voyager make, a seed or a Series A investment, most likely. The way we're structured, we will have to maintain at least 51% ownership of a company for us to, from an accounting standpoint, to continue to consolidate our financials. So really with that is coming more established companies. So all the companies that we really acquire have revenue, they have EBITDA, and they have free cash flow. And typically they have very low debt. So that's how I would think about us. And I kind of call it, I call it new space purgatory. Essentially, there's a lot of companies that get to this point where they've gotten maybe early investment rounds, but when the larger sophisticated venture capital investors come in for the later stage venture rounds, they're just convinced they're not going to be able to clear their hurdle rate to get paid carried interest in their fund. So as a result, they kind of stall out. But yet at this point, they may have revenue and EBITDA and cash flow. And they're very, very good companies. They're just really not going to produce venture returns within the time horizons required. But yet they're still likely really not a good fit for a prime like a Honeywell or something. A company doing 40 million top lines really still too small for like a Lockheed or a Honeywell most likely. And they may just not want to work for a prime. A lot of these entrepreneurs came from a prime as well. So we essentially look to invest and acquire companies that are more established, that want to still be entrepreneurial, but yet kind of have some of these support mechanisms that come with maybe being a larger company. We talked about some of the shared services and things like that.
Thanks, Matthew. What's your perspective, Meagan? You've got Orbit Fab, which is definitely B2B or even B2G, and Made in Space. Maybe one day they could be doing something on the B2C or tourism market, but it's probably too soon to tell. Oh, you're on mute, Meagan.
Seems to be the theme of the day. Apologies. So yeah, we're very interested in the tourism market, and in fact, here at SpaceFund, we refer to it as actual personal space flight as opposed to space tourism, because then that encompasses a lot more activities than just going up for a vacation. But this is national astronauts who might not be a part of the current ISS group. This includes people going for research. This includes the idea of a priest or a holy man going and spending a couple days in seclusion, right? There's all kinds of activities that can happen in space besides just tourism. And so we're looking broadly at that entire market, tourism, of course, being a part of it. And that's one of the reasons that we're so keen on our existing portfolio company, Axiom. So not only are they building a commercial space station, but they've already signed up commercial private spaceflight participants to go to the International Space Station and kind of providing that brokerage service, if you will. So they're already starting to do this. They already have flights booked. They already have revenue associated with that. To Matt's point, revenue is very important in the space industry. You don't always see that with the earlier stage companies. And so one of the things, too, that we're very interested in is what we see as a coming housing shortage or hotel shortage. If Starship becomes operational and 100 people at a time can go to space, where are they all going to go? There's no facilities there for them to go and visit. There's no Disneyland in space yet, right? So very interested to see how that market develops. And a lot of the companies that we're looking at right now are very early stage. We're kind of the complement. I like to think of us as a bit of a complement to Voyager, as we can do that early stage investing and help get those companies ready to go to somebody like Voyager. And we are seeing a lot of companies that are trying to solve these problems that are in those very early stages right now.
Thank you, Meagan. I want to go back to Matthew. This is kind of a personal question. You're a former fighter pilot who flew in supersonic aircraft. What is your opinion around there's been these press releases regarding some of the suborbital groups like Virgin that want to potentially disrupt long-haul travel. Does that fit into space to tourism? Is it just a distraction? What's your take on that?
Well, honestly, I probably take a bit of a contrarian view that I think that is the real key long-term value of this sector. Because, you know, for example, if you look at the current global tourism market, due to COVID, in the last 4 months, it's down $1.1 trillion. If it goes for 8 months, it's going to be just over $2 trillion. You know, tourism, I know I've personally canceled, since it was a personal question, I've canceled 3 vacations this year. So to me, flying into space, which I have, you know, friends that are ticket holders of these things, it is a luxury good. It is not required versus airline travel. At some point, you know, you need to fly. Sometimes you just have to fly things. We're not going to hop on a Titanic anytime soon and start transiting the ocean like we did, you know, 100 years ago. So for me, it's kind of hard to imagine. But when the Wright brothers flew in Kitty Hawk, you know, 10 years, 15 years later, we had World War II dogfighters, and within 40 years, we had commercial air travel. So although I think people generally don't think exponential, they think linearly. I think if we look forward 30 to 50 years, the hypersonic transcontinental travel might actually be what's actually the real value driver of this. And this is really the step one, or crawl, walk one stage of it.
So would you go back to flying if you had an opportunity to fly one of those vehicles?
Yeah. No, I wish I'd love to have an F-15 parked on my driveway.
I take it was a fun aircraft to fly.
It was very fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And Bonnie, back over to you with the, there was one of your portfolio companies, and I might have to cheat and look at the notes. They're doing 3D, they're doing 3D work. Hollows, is that the correct? Yeah, the current cohort. So they're doing 3D at the intersection of, it sounds like education, 3D, maybe some VR. Can you share a little bit about that group, and maybe does that group have potential opportunities around space tourism? They are part of the space cohort.
Yeah, they are. And I would say, you know, all of the companies, and I think our program is interesting because it is that intersection. All of the partners that I listed out before is the intersection of military, civil, and commercial. So that intersection is where you're going to see the growth, and you're going to see things really start to shift. So as we all know, most technology applications started out as military applications and then grew into what they are today, into commercial applications. So Hollows, for example, yes, they actually have a VR content management system that makes it very easy for the operators, and specifically they're working with military operators right now, but it goes beyond that, certainly into educational as well. That's their roots. But to making it easy to create digital environments where training is accessible and easily facilitated and not as costly. And that becomes important for not only terrestrial missions, but also for space missions. So, you know, all of these technologies, you know, for a new economy, you need infrastructure, and you need all of the things that go along with tourism in the long term. So it's all part of the same picture. It's building those fundamental foundational steps of, is it safe? Is it workable? Can we rely on it? And then you build on there to, how do we make it fun? How do we make it enjoyable? How do we get people inspired, excited about it? And that's where you'll start to see tourism really start to bud from all of these really, really practical applications.
Thank you, Bonnie. Another company I'll just highlight that I saw on the cohort list that looked like it could have some maybe personal spaceflight and tourism applications would be V Robotics, and that it looks like they're doing remote use of, I guess, robotic devices like arms, and I think, you know, that is, I mean, robotics and space are going to be they already are a huge component. Most of our satellites essentially are already robotic. So I think we have to remind those maybe who are new to this area or just learning about this area that robotics and space are going to be a key enabler because humans are fragile, we're soft and squishy, and we will need robotic partners, especially in the harsh environment of the space environment. Maybe we should turn it over. I haven't looked at the chat, but if there are some questions, I didn't know if we had any Q&A, if it was ready, because sometimes that always gets cut short in these type of situations. But I'm going to kind of scan.
Let me,
Allison.
yeah. So I see some chat questions here. So what are the top 3 biggest hurdles for space tourism to take off?
I'll take a stab at this one. I think honestly, the biggest hurdle is price, right? As Robert mentioned, this is a luxury good, right? Or maybe it was Matt.
It was Matt.
I forget. As Matt mentioned, this is a luxury good. It's not something that everybody can afford right now. And but in order to get that price down, obviously we have to do it more and more and get better and better at it, and bring that cost down to where more and more people can experience this. So I think that's the biggest hurdle. I think that the technology part is well on its way to being solved. Virgin is very, very close, Blue Origin and SpaceX. So I think you're going to see a competitive environment with multiple providers and multiple experiences. I know you guys had Jane Pointer on for your last webinar, and that's even a completely different experience, right? So I think that the tech part, we're pretty close. There's still some technical hurdles, but we're pretty close on that. And then I'd say the last thing is going to be safety. The third thing would be safety. And again, this just comes from continued operations and proving that this can be done safely. And, when the steam engine first came out, people thought that their heads would explode if they traveled that fast, right? And it took a little while for people to understand that wasn't true. And same thing here. I think a lot more people will be interested in going once that safety has been proven.
Maybe just one thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Just one thing to add, and it kind of touched on the safety, is I would call it reputational risk. If you're going to invest in a company that does offshore drilling, and then there's an oil spill, that can be pretty bad for your investment. So I think there was about 135 space shuttle launches, and we lost 2. I think I read somewhere at one point that at that failure rate, we'd lose about 280 commercial airliners a day at the same failure rate ratios. So to me, if commercial space flight is perhaps a luxury good item, think about market cap and Virgin Galactic, for example. What happens to market cap if there's an explosion or some kind of failure with paying passengers on board, not a test pilot? So I would kind of call that reputational risk. So it's very important that these things are, mitigate that as best as possible, because that could be a nail in the coffin.
If I can just add to that, Matt, one of the most complex parts about doing anything in space is that there's no atmosphere, right? So the temperature on the moon varies so much in a 24-hour human period, Earth period, that the technology might work for part of that period, and then it might completely fail, not only fail, but completely break in the alternate temperature. So in order to have the technical expertise of people who are able to, from an engineering perspective, understand how to build off of this planet is a huge hurdle. And that doesn't mean that there's a bar to entry for non-technical founders, but it does mean that generally speaking, for early stage founders, there is a technical expertise. There's an understanding, like Matt has, flying, like his background speaks well to what he is trying to do for space. He has an understanding of some of the risks, the hurdles, the challenges. And I think having those understandings and making sure that the community is well informed is a huge hurdle as well.
Yeah, I think that the questions were adequately answered, but I'll jump in. An important thing to address, maybe, and this is part of the space tourism experience, is some people like John Spencer, who found the Space Tourism Society, have talked about this as being just the experience economy. So many times when people, they travel for experience and they buy experiences. They're not necessarily, they don't care as much about like which plane they get on to get there. Now, space might be a little bit different for a little while, but I think we need to continue to think about, like, why do we want to go? And somebody brought this up in the chat, and sharing both as an industry and just better sharing why go in the first place to have that experience. And part of that experience for many on the human space flight side will be to have that overview effect. And we actually have, I think on the call today is the author of the overview effect, who coined the term, Frank White, and it's sharing why humans want to have this experience and how it could potentially make an individual a better human, how they could better connect with their humans when they get back to Earth. And I think that will be something unique, a unique characteristic of a space tourism experience. Allison, do you want to bring in, are there some more questions?
Well, there are a couple more questions. Let's just take the one more regarding the kind of data infrastructure needed to help mitigate the risk we're talking about, and also help create the rest of, as part of the rest of the infrastructure, to make this a viable industry, building out the facilities and all of that needed to have a tourism experience.
And so what was I guess I'm missing the question.
The data infrastructure, what sort of data infrastructure will take to introduce a more capable generation of robots and all the other things that take to actually do construction in space?
I'll let, if somebody wants to jump in, but I'm also happy to talk.
It might be something that I would think maybe Matt's evaluating.
Oh, Matt, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would say from a Voyager perspective and how we see it is, think of like the Transcontinental Railroad. That really created, really helped formative era of our economy for the country. And then you think about airline travel. So to us, those things are infrastructure. So what is the infrastructure needed to then bolt on all these other cool and exciting types of technology? So things perhaps on-orbit manufacturing, data transfer, laser transfer, whatever it is. So, we really think about what is the infrastructure required to then build on. So how do we open up the pipes? Fiber optic cable, a lot of fiber optic cable was laid that was really not being used, and there was a big bust in the economy, but now it's all filled. So we really think about what is the infrastructure needed. That's maybe some of the less sexy, less exciting things, but really is a requirement to grow this sector.
Yeah. If I can jump in, I think that the early infrastructure needs will rely quite a lot on AI as well as robotics. And that's, Robert, to your point, V-Rotors is a telerobotics platform that they have immediate applications terrestrially and are able to do with drones, are able to collaboratively work on different problems that are here on Earth, and the extension of that will be to do that in space and time. But the cost of bringing humans to space, to build that infrastructure is extensive, and so to have technology with telerobotics, with AI that's getting smarter all the time, is going to be a huge component of that. And by the way, Neil from V-Rotors, he just wrote me, he's on this call, so hi, Neil.
And from the SpaceFund perspective, talking about the data part of it, that's something that we're very interested in. Right now, there's more data being collected in space than can either be processed or downlinked. So that's a problem that needs to be solved for the industry overall, regardless of the extra needs of data and communication once tourism really starts getting going. So we're very interested in people solving the low Earth orbit communications problems. And we're also looking at what's happening beyond that, right? NASA is going to have boots on the moon. Several other countries are trying to get boots on the moon in the next few years? How are all of those robots and all of those rovers, how are they going to communicate with each other and communicate back to Earth? So there's a lot to be done still in the kind of data side that I think will help support the tourism industry once it gets up and running.
Well, to that end, I think that's a nice segue to our wrap. The data piece for telecommunications in general, right, is driven by data and was created to create data. Is also a driver of the film and television industry, out of which I come. And all this advanced media plays right into this. So with AI, big data, AR, VR, Earth-based experiences, right, are a huge driver of demand. And even these franchises that we know, the beloved ones like Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Wars, I think, has $56 billion in revenue alone. Some of these things are all themselves like mini channel sectors within it that drive demand. And also those industries, 3D printing, visual effects, all those things that come into data visualization also go part and part. So we feel the Space Tourism Society and the Space Tourism Conference, which, you know, John Spencer is a co-founder of the latter with me and the founder of STS, feel very strongly that the Earth-based experiences and those things that are also getting funded because they create these fun space experiences and inspiration are also a big driver toward the rest of the demand. And those technologies are very mutable in and among, they cross quite handily, to Meagan's point. So I think we're going to wrap now, but we could have gone on all day, I think. What a wonderful, wonderful set of people. You guys are so accomplished. I feel like we just sort of scratched the surface. We want to thank our sponsors, of course, Ivan Rosenberg, who is the man behind the screen here from the Aerospace and Defense Forum, Los Angeles Venture Association, which I chair the digital media group, which we cross over, as I said, and Digital Expert Dojo, some of these other folks. Also, TV of Tomorrow show. Tracy is on here. It's a wonderful conference, and we do actually address these things because they do cross paths. And I just want to leave you with, I want to read a little passage from Robert's book, because I think it's very telling that the tagline on his book is "Industry that can transform humanity," and I think he addresses it as a business point. Space is not just a destination, it is a domain, an ecosystem, and an enabler. When we dream of improving our lives on Earth, we find answers within the great mysteries that the universe above us contains. It's no surprise that we find endless ways to incorporate space into our daily lives. From the films we watch to the GPS we use during our commute, or why interactions with space tend to leave such lasting impressions. We want to explore. We want to understand. We want to believe. So I think that is where this community is so wonderful, because you have all these very technically proficient, extremely smart people that also typically have a heart and understand the big picture. And it's wonderful to be able to know that it's also going to be very profitable. So it's a win-win. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Keep an eye out for the next one. As I said, this is a series that leads up to the conference, which is April 28th, 2021, the anniversary of Tito's flight. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you.
Thanks
all.
for having us, Allison.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have you. See ya.